Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to buy a direct marketing business or any kind of business using $0 of your own money. This is an actual listing on BizBuySell, and we're going to go into it. Okay, so here's the listing right here. They say they're a 22-year-old direct marketing business in North Carolina. Great. Asking 1.25 million, saying it does 359,000 in cash flow. Mind you, what does cash flow mean? Great question. These are the kinds of things you really have to ask in diligence. And I mean, if you just look at this listing, it's like all of the listings you're going to find on BizBuy for sell. It tells you what a wonderful business it is. You work from home. It's 90% recurring revenue. If you notice, if you go through enough of these listings, they all basically sound like the best business in the world. Buyer beware. Nevertheless, I don't want to be pessimistic here. I want to show you how to finance a deal like this using other people's money. Okay, so we go to a deal analysis worksheet like this one. You can create your own. And here's really the punchline. Okay, so I put in the asking price of 1.25 million. Let's just say right now we're going to go with that price. I describe the deal. And obviously, I don't have historical financials. I don't know the historical revenue or cost of goods sold, gross profit. I don't know the trailing 3-year financials. But what I do know is they gave me a couple of basic numbers, right? They gave me the asking price, which we'll just say, we'll just say that's the price we're going to pay. Okay, and they give me cash flow, which by that, what they really mean is earnings. Okay, this is how much the owner should cash flow or earn. Again, a number you should be somewhat skeptical of, but we're going to run with it. Okay. So let's just assume for a minute that everything about this deal is on point. Okay. That these numbers right here are true, that it does about 1.3 in revenue, about 359,000 in cash flow, and they are asking, 1.25 million. Great. What I did here, and this is a model I use for my deals, real simple, but it gives me a nice, clean analysis of the deal. What I did here is I put in some basic financing assumptions. And I want to show you this because this will help you finance your own deals using none of your own money. Okay, so first of all, the SBA 7A, okay, I'm going to zoom in on it because it deserves, oh, this thing's not zooming in all nice and easy. Do you know what? I'm just going to highlight it or I'm going to circle it or whatever. SBA 7A, okay? I'm emphasizing it because it is the simplest way to get finance to buy other businesses, to buy people's businesses. You can use the SBA for a whole bunch of things. You can use the SBA 7A for a whole bunch of things. But in this example, we're talking about the SBA 7A, which is a loan, a government-backed loan in the United States to buy a cash flowing business. And that's really what we're talking about here. Okay, so I put in basically about 80% of the purchase price, and you can see my formula up here in the top left-hand corner. You may have to zoom in a little bit, but that is the formula that we're talking about. And let me do this. I can get a bigger zoom here so y'all can see a little bit more. Here we go. Okay, so you see the asking price. We're going down to the financing assumptions, and you see here that all I'm doing is I'm saying 80% of the purchase price. Okay, I'm going to finance with SBA 7A. Because that is something you can get done. Now, I amortize this loan based on real world inputs, and we're in a higher interest rate environment right now. So I put 10% for the rate. You see that here. Okay, I amortize it over 120 months, 10 years, because that's what an SBA 7A loan is. And through my handy dandy calculator, I know that my monthly payment is going to be 13 grand. Okay, what's next? I made the assumption that on this deal, I need 100 grand in working capital. You may be able to get away with less, but let's just say you want 100 grand in working capital post-close. Working capital is super important because it's how you make payroll, it's how you pay bills, and it's how you really sustain the business, okay? Key to working capital in this video is not about analyzing how much working capital you should bring, but know that whether or not you buy the age receivables and or the age payables, and understanding how quickly the business gets paid. Do you get paid as soon as you deliver a service? Do you get paid within 30 days of delivering a service, 60 days of delivering a service? Different businesses have different cash flow cycles. All of that influences how much working capital you should bring. For this, I'm making a base assumption that you want to bring 100 grand to the table. It's going to amortize on it's the same deal, basically, 120 month, AKA 10 years at a 10% interest rate. Great. Next. Okay, and this is a huge one. If you've watched my content before, you know that you can get the seller to contribute half of the equity required for an SBA loan. You need 10% down to do an SBA deal, but you can really only put down 5% in cash. If you notice, this amount is equal to this amount, right? The seller finance injection, the equity injection for the seller finance loan is the same as the equity injection, which is actual cash. Okay, because the deal is, and this is 5%, each of these are 5% of the purchase price, 5% of 1.25, because the basic tenet of doing SBA deals is you put 5% down as a cash payment, which by the way, you can raise from an investor. All right. And then the other 5% you put on hold for the life of the SBA loan. Okay. So what this means really is you get to pay this seller finance equity injection loan, if you will, after 10 years, after you fully pay off your SBA loan. So I don't even work the monthly payment because literally this is something here where you're thinking about making this payment in 10 years from the time you do the deal. Okay. So in 10 years from now, when the business is otherwise completely paid off, you can worry about this. But you can just, I mean, if you wanted, you could just say that you're going to pay it. Well, usually the seller will want it faster after they got held out for 10 years. So let's say you're going to pay it in 12 months at 10%. Okay. And then you could carry this formula down if you were so inclined. And yeah, it's going to say that 1 year you would make a $52,000 payment, but I'm going to zero that out because we're not making that. Okay. This is on hold. That's why it counts as equity, because you're not actually making payments on this note when you're making your SBA loan. Okay. Next, I put in another seller finance note. Okay. The way you finance these small SBA deals is you have the bulk of the purchase price in your SBA 7A loan. You put 5% cash. That's what this represents here. Okay. You put 5% on hold for the life of the first position note. That's how you get the total of a 10% equity contribution. And then I like to work in some seller finance. Here I said 10% of the purchase price. So the purchase price is 1.25 million. I'm saying, hey, 125 grand, we're going to pay you out over time. We're going to, in this example I just used, we're going to pay you out over 10 years, AKA 120 months, also at a 10% rate. Okay. And the monthly payment there is 1,600 and change. And then the equity injection. This is something that you can go out and raise from a doctor, a lawyer, a family, a friend, whatever. You just go out and raise 62 grand. I talk about how to raise equity in other videos, but let's just say for the sake of simplicity that you went out and you raised $62,000 in cash, or you contributed your own 62,500 in cash. And what I have next is your cumulative cost of debt. Super simple. All I'm doing is adding up all my debt obligations. Okay, that's it. And this needs to zero out because in theory, you're not making any required debt payment on your equity injection. In fact, you cannot, per SBA code, make guaranteed payments on the equity because then it would be a debt instrument, and equity has to be participating in the upside as opposed to an obligation. Debt versus equity. I know I'm talking a lot. If you don't understand anything I'm saying, subscribe to the YouTube channel and watch out my stuff, because financing deals using entirely other people's money is fairly technical, but once you understand it, you can make a hell of a lot of money doing this. Anyways, I just combine all the debt instruments here. Okay, this is my monthly debt. You see how I added them up. Get a yearly sum. I multiply it by 12, not rocket science. You see the math here. And then I do some basic projected cash flow analysis on an annualized basis. Okay, I have 3 columns here. Worst case, base case, best case. Now, obviously, to really, to do this correctly, to do this kind of analysis correctly, you have to build a perspective on how bad do you think the worst case could actually be? What do you actually expect the year 1 base case to be? This depends on if there's management in place or not. This depends on whether or not the business has been increasing in recent years or if it's been declining in recent years, right? There's all kinds of factors that come into play. How good of an operator do you feel like you're going to be if you're going to get involved in operations? All types of things you can talk about. But for this example, I just said that the worst case scenario was the 2022 cash flow projections multiplied by 0.7, aka 70%. So worst case scenario, which is probably a bit conservative. You could usually do a lot worse than that if you don't know what you're doing. But I'm saying, hey, worst case scenario, we're going to only do 7/10 as well as we did in the year prior. Base case, I'm saying we're going to do exactly the same as what's advertised on the deal, 359G a year. That's our base case EBITDA, which really I should just say cash flow. for the sake of simplicity. I'm not trying to geek out on the technicalities of cash flow versus, owners earnings or seller's discretionary earnings versus EBITDA. I mean, these are all similar phrases. They basically mean bottom line profit. What are you actually taking to the bottom line? But I'm saying worst case is 251 G's, base case is 359. In best case, I take last year's quote unquote number and I multiply it by 1.4. I know this is a little all over the place, but you see the formula up here. I multiply it by 1.4. So it's the same. Basically, we're going to do 40% better than last year. And there are my numbers there. Now, let me zoom out a little bit so you can see, what's really going on here, because this is really where the rubber hits the road. Now, the key, of course, is to understand and confirm you have good inputs. But if you do, then you can do some real cash flow analysis. We're really here. You're projecting your free cash flow after debt service. So what are these numbers? We'll use the base case as an example. You are basically taking your free cash flow, subtracting it from your annualized debt service, and you're saying, hey, after I pay my debt, I have $165,000 left. Okay, your DSCR, which stands for debt service coverage ratio, which is basically how much free cash flow do you have after debt. You do a simple division equation, which I show you here. And it basically saying, hey, I have 85 cents on the dollar in free cash flow after I pay my debt instrument. You can tell that's right because look, 165 is almost as much as your annualized debt payment. It's not quite double. If it were double, it'd be 200%. It's at 185%. There you have it. This is a formula that I used back in the day to calculate our take versus our investors. It's not needed. But this is really the punchline as far as how you analyze a deal. You have to figure out, how much do you think you're going to take home? That's what this really represents here in this analysis. 359 G a year, you're expecting to take to the bottom line. Okay. You work it into your financing assumptions. I recommend about 80% of your purchase price come from SBA. Okay. 5% you put on hold through a seller finance note that's on hold for the life of the SBA note. You raise 5% in cash. You put about 10% down in seller finance, say on an equal, interest rate and amortization schedule as your SBA loan, and then go out and raise yourself some working capital as well. And the SBA with the right lender will provide that. You add up your cumulative cost of debt, which we did here, and then you punch it into your annualized free cash flow projections. And if you do this, you have properly analyzed your deal. Just make sure your inputs are correct. And if you do this, you can really figure out if a deal will work. But in this case, you could afford, if this free cash flow number is true and accurate, let's highlight it, okay? If this number is actually true, if you're actually going to be taking home $359 a year in earnings under your ownership, then you could afford to pay $1.25 million without really using any of your own money. You can finance this deal. You raise 5% of the purchase price in cash from an investor, again, a doctor, a lawyer, a friend, a family member, whomever, and you can keep the vast majority of the equity in this deal if you did it right. Okay, so that's it. That's all. Hopefully you've liked this video. If you have, subscribe for more case studies and financing analysis videos like this. Thumbs it up if you've liked it. Share a comment below. What do you want to talk about next? All that good stuff. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you in the next one.